Hello and welcome to Charlton TV for our third biannual Meet the Directors event. It has been a very busy 6 months, both on and off the pitch, and we just so happen to be in the middle of January, which is pretty hectic in the football calendar as well. But we thought it would be an opportune moment to bring the club's hierarchy together to catch up on all things Charlton athletics. So without further ado, let's crack on. Before 7:30 p.m, we're going to cross over to Sparrows Lane to speak to the club's managing director, James Rodwell, and men's first team manager, Nathan Jones, to speak all things football and look at how things are progressing on the pitch for our men's first team. Before then, we'll hear from the new chairman of the Charlton board, Gavin Carter, and the club's chief executive officer, Charlie Methven. We'll find out the 2 fan representatives who have been elected for the Charlton Advisory Board. And of course, most importantly, we'll be hearing from you with your opportunity to ask your questions to members of the club's board. So you've heard it there. We would love for you to get involved in this evening's show. On your screen right now is the all-important WhatsApp number. So send through your messages, send through your questions. It's 07384 517 580, and we will be putting your questions to Gavin and Charlie throughout the show. So without further ado, I'm so delighted to have both of you here in the Charlton TV studio. Gavin, I just mentioned it earlier, your appointment as chair of the board. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail later on. But in the past 6 months since our last meeting, how have things been?
Yeah, busy. I think a lot has been implemented. We can talk about the governance structure that we're putting in across the club. So the Charlton Athletic Board, the advisory board that you've already mentioned. I think things are beginning to gel on the pitch. And we're seeing that in improving results in the pitch recently, and that's good. It takes some time to bed that in. Things like the sports performance department, I think we're seeing the benefits of the investments we've made there with player availability. We saw that particularly over the Christmas period when all those fixtures were very congested. And generally, not to be too optimistic, but I think we are seeing improving metrics, across the club. And we've said this is a steady, progressive approach to building what we want to build here. It is a long journey, but I think that I think we're moving in the right direction.
And Charlie, we've had a couple of meetings like this, which I think have been really useful. It's great to connect and engage with the fan base, and I think it was perhaps maybe even our first meeting, we saw a bit of a presentation about the vision for the future, the plans that the club wanted to evolve over the year, and I think there's a few financial figures you want to share and talk through for us. So why don't we start there?
Yeah, I just thought, Charlotte, it'd be really useful just, in the spirit of transparency, and so that we can all know what we're looking at the same time and try and take some sort of, rumours and everything else out of the situation, that it'd be useful just to, go through where the numbers are, what we're receiving and what we're spending and where we're spending it, and also to, have a look back at what the situation was before we took over. It's a reasonably simplified slide. This, obviously, in the finance director's books, it's broken down into 100 different pieces, but we've tried to keep it reasonably top line here to make it as digestible as possible. Broadly speaking, the year before we took over, the total income of the club was £9.27 million. That did include a major windfall from the Manchester United League Cup tie. That would have been more like £8.5 million without that, but nonetheless, it was around about £9 million. And you can see on the right there that we're forecasting to hit a number, in and around £11 million this year. So you're looking at a sort of uptick of revenues of £1.5 to £2 million over the last 18 months on a seasonal basis. And that really comes through, incremental increases across every vertical. So ticketing, as I said, did have a bump in that year. That number would have been more like sort of, 3.75 million instead. And we're seeing an increase of about £1 million to this year. And that's between season tickets and match-to-match tickets. So that's the combination of the things. Commercial and hospitality, you'll see a healthy uptick across those areas. Retail, which we took back in-house last summer, that was a major piece of work because disentangling the agreements that we had in place previously with our partner Castor was complex, but the shop manager and her staff have really done an excellent job of driving that, and that's an area that we think can be driven forward even more in the future. And then central distribution, that's the money that we receive from the Football League and the Premier League and EPPP, etc., in various different, whether it be for TV rights or for contribution to academy funding from EPPP, etc., it should be borne in mind that there was a significant uptick this year from the Football League. The Football League sold its foreign TV rights, and clubs in League One got an extra £500,000. The flip side of that was it came with us not being able to stream in as many territories. So that £500,000 has also come with £100,000 less of streaming revenue. And it's also, of course, led to more games being held away from that 3 p.m. Saturday time, which always leads to a slightly lower level of ticketing. So it was a lovely increase, but it's not entirely without its sort of corollaries on the other side. So, as I said, what you're seeing here is £1.5 to £2 million extra of revenue. A bit of that's to do with inflation, inevitably. But the vast majority of it's come through the team here at the Valley working really hard to try and improve all of these areas. And of course, it comes from the fans, because this is the fans' money, with the exception of the distribution money. Retail, commercial hospitality and ticketing is mostly coming from our fans and connections of our fans. In terms of how it's being spent, you'll see that just before we took over, that the club was spending £19 million a year there and thereabouts. It's now £20 million there or thereabouts. And really what you've seen here is a very significant increase in football expenditure, from just over 10 million to just a shade short of 12 million. So effectively a £2 million increase in how much we're spending on the pitch, which has then been underpinned partially by the revenue increase, but also partially by being able to hold down the costs here at the Valley. And that's going for every single cost line, the finance director and myself and the various staff, and trying to make sure that even when it comes to what we pay Charlton TV presenters, we are super careful about what we pay, as you well know. So overall, it adds up to an operational loss around £9 million. That's obviously not where we want to end up. That's historically would be right at the top end of what a League One club can lose. But at the same time, the ownership has been very steadfast in saying that in these initial years, as we complete the turnaround job, that they will confidently provide funding at that type of level, knowing that the numbers are heading in the right direction and that things are moving in the right direction. Of course, that's what part of Gavin's job is, to make sure that he's overseeing that on their behalf.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. That was a really good note, and a very interesting note as well to begin with. Global Football Partners took over the club in July 2023. So a question for you both, but Gavin, I'll come to you first. If I was to ask you to pick out one of the big successes you feel we've had during that time, and then perhaps to highlight one of the challenges as well, what would you go for?
Biggest success. I mean, I think we're always obviously looking for more success. But I think the biggest success for me is perhaps laying the foundation in these governance structures. And that's not to sound boring, but I think the establishment of this advisory board improved engagement with the fans. And look, we've got a long way still to go there. But, I think building back, those relationships is probably the thing that personally I'm most proud of. And I think, recruiting some really talented people into the organisation. I mentioned the sports performance department, but you look at the academy, you look at our first team, you look at the management structure around. I think that we feel like we've been successful in that area, and I'm beginning to see the fruits of that.
Yeah, and challenge-wise, biggest challenge so far?
Well, I think the first season's a challenge, because when we came in, when the deal was completed, a lot of things were already baked for last season. Yeah. And that's not to make excuses, but it was a very difficult transfer window coming in late. We obviously went through the changes of the first team manager, and none of us obviously were anywhere near content with the league performance, last year. So, I mean, I think that whole that first season, and Charlie may guide on this as well, is that first season is very difficult because you're working on such constrained timelines. But I think with that behind us now, and as I say, the foundation being laid, it can probably never happen quickly enough success, but I do feel like we're on the right path.
Yeah, I think, Charlie, when we first spoke, when you were appointed CEO, you said it was almost like opening up the car bonnet. You have to spend a lot of time almost soaking in up everything, learning how the cogs and the functionality of the football club operate before then, I suppose, implementing change. So if I was to ask you to highlight a success and perhaps the biggest challenge you've experienced over the past year, where would you direct that?
I'm just not going to talk about success, because I think that in reality, as long as Charlton's in League One, there's no point in talking about success. As Gav said, you can talk about laying some of the foundations to achieve success, but that's not success. Success starts with getting this club out of this division, and we're all totally realistic about that. We're not, blind to the reality of the situation. Charlton's average historic position in the pyramid is a mid-table championship club. So when you are in 10th place in League One, there's no point in talking about success. It's not success. In terms of challenges, as Gavin said, the majority of things that happen in a football season are baked in before the start of the season. You sell your season tickets before the season, you sell your sponsorship before the season, you recruit the vast majority of your squad before the season starts. All of these things are already in place. So when you come in, as we did, a week before the start of the season, you've got months and months ahead of you, which are happening with your name above the door, but with decisions having been made already, which you would not have made and would rather have done differently. And it's not just decisions, it's also that the fundamental underlying changes that you want to make don't produce instant results. So we appointed Will Abbott to be performance director this time last year, and it's really now that we're seeing squad availability at way above league norms, right? So, that's been a year of hard work behind the scenes at Sparrows Lane by somebody who we appointed last January to get to the place where now we can hopefully start to outperform in that area rather than just be up to performance, but certainly way beyond where Charlton have been in recent years. So those were some of the sort of the macro challenges. I think probably in terms of an individual particular challenge, last late August, we came under very significant cyber attack as an organisation, and that was an extremely challenging month to unpick all that and deal with all that at the same time as actually carrying on running an operation which is basically very IT dependent now these days. So that was a massive challenge which the team here at the Valley, I can't say enough about the team here at the Valley. They're so good and so hardworking and just so self-starters. The people that actually get on and do stuff. And really just their success in getting this whole organisation through a major cyber attack without any significant setbacks, either financially or in terms of what was put on the pitch. I think that was a terrific success. Not one I can claim personal credit for, but one which I would certainly ascribe to the team here.
A reminder to supporters that you can get involved in this evening's show by contacting us on WhatsApp. The number is on the screen. I've got my phone ready, and I can tell you, gents, the questions are coming in thick and fast. We're covering a range of topics such as the academy, the pitch behind us at the Valley, and the ownership of the stadium as well. We will have the opportunity to get into those a little bit later on. But for now, we are going to turn our attentions to Sparrows Lane, where I'm delighted to say that Ali Maxwell is joined by first team manager Nathan Jones and managing director James Rodwell. So over to you, Ali.
Thank you, Charlotte. Good evening, Charlton fans. I'm Ali Maxwell. I'm at the training ground and delighted to be joined by Charlton's managing director, James Rodwell, and the men's first team manager, Nathan Jones. Evening to you both. Good evening. Long old trip up north. Nathan, Rotherham away, Bolton away. How good did it feel to come back with all 3 points from Bolton?
Yeah, look, we've had a long week. Obviously, we had two trips with the Preston one as well on a Tuesday night. But the Bolton performance, the Bolton win was really important, especially after the Saturday, the disappointment of the Saturday. So, the club backed us. We stayed up for the 5 days, from Friday right through to the Tuesday, which helped. And then we were able to get the right result in the second game and probably kind of make amends a little bit for the Saturday performance.
So my job is to ask some of the questions that have been sent in and will be sent in as we chat from the Charlton fans. Jim, it's January. We're at the training ground, which is a busy place always, but particularly this month. I'm sure you guys are spending a lot of late nights here. It's the transfer window. And with a few players having left this window, but with none having come in just yet, I think on behalf of the fans, I've got to ask, any transfer updates you can give us?
No updates as such, other than people are working incredibly hard. I think what we've determined that we want to do, I think Nathan's pretty happy with his squad at the moment, which only needs tweaking, probably slimlining just a little bit, which we've managed to do with a couple of players who have gone out, who had other opportunities to play football. But we're not looking at major overhaul in this window. It's an incredibly tricky window. It's an expensive window to operate in. But by and large, I think Nathan's quite happy with his squad. But hopefully we're going to tweak it before the window closes. But at the moment, it's lots of conversations, lots of videos, not a huge deal of movement at the moment. But I think there will be probably a couple of outs and maybe some incomings before the window closes. But yeah, it's a hive of activity.
Yeah, there's always focus on incomings, Nathan, but streamlining the squad can also be really important. Can you explain from the manager's point of view why losing players or streamlining can be a positive?
Well, first of all, you have to look at the whole picture of recruitment, really. When we came in, we inherited a lot of players and so on. Some you can take forward, some you believe you can take forward, some you can't. You want to put your own stamp on it. You want players that one, are familiar with how you want to play, two, that can implement your game plan, and be with you through a journey of a long period of time. So what we have here is the club backed us in the window. The summer window, we improved the squad significantly, we think. And then there's the streamlining process to move people out, to move people on for the benefit of the club, for the benefit of their careers. Now, we weren't able to do all our business in one window. That takes time. So what we've had here is we've had people, and we've had quite a big squad right through to January. So what our goal was here was to improve the productivity of the squad. Now that means one, streamlining it so that those we're going to take forward then get the responsibility, get the game time, get the time on the training pitch to improve them, and then we're able to tweak and bring in little bits of much better quality, or not much better quality, but a different quality to give us different attributes to win football games. Now, the thing about bringing new players in the amount we did in the summer, that takes time for them to settle. So in terms of streamlining, in terms of giving those the best opportunity, and then now seeing the fruition in this second half, that's why this is not a massive window, and it's important that we get the right people, not a quantity of people.
Jim, is it quite nice from your point of view to, instead of feeling like there's loads of gaps to be plugged in January, as you referenced, a transfer window not known for its value and for tons of quality being available, is it quite nice to be in a position where maybe you can focus on doing the right deal for the right player, but not feeling the pressure of having to spread yourselves too thin?
We are very specific about the players that we want to bring in. We're very specific about the positions. We're very clear about what that player should look like, or the profile of that player. And I think it's fair to say, if we cannot get what we want, we would be comfortable doing nothing at the moment. We're not going to bring anybody in for the sake of it, or any type of clickbait or anything else. We're just, we're very happy with the squad we've got at the moment, but you're always looking to improve, looking to evolve. And, one of the most important things about any window is the players that you actually keep as well. That is as important as anybody you can bring in. And we're very fortunate in that position. We have, lots of other teams, higher up the pyramid than us. They, covet some of our players, which is a good thing. That means we've got good players that, other teams higher up the pyramid think can, improve their squads. But also, from an ownership point of view, we're never under any pressure to do anything, to sell. We're not a distressed seller like many clubs are. So keeping hold of, and importantly, none of our players appear to want to leave or go anywhere, which is, a testament to this guy and the culture that's been created here and the coaching staff. So keeping the players that you want in the door is as important, if not more important, than the people that you bring in.
And it's really important as well, the culture, the environment we have here is a developing culture. We like to work with players, we like to make them better, and you see the fruition of that over time. You don't just see it, we don't get buy-in ready-made, the ones that are going to instantly give you massive amount of success. There's a lot of young players here that we work with, that we make better, and that they get better in this environment. And then the players we've brought in, one, take a little bit of time to settle, but then you will now see the benefit of that. So by adding a vast amount of more players, you just dilute things rather than enhance the capabilities we have.
And you can cut off some of the pathways for players like Miles, Tyrese, Karoy, who obviously made a big impact up at Bolton as well. Nathan, taking a step back from this month, February the 4th will mark a year in charge for you as Charlton Athletics manager. How do you reflect on your first year?
It's been thoroughly enjoyable. It's been challenges, but it's been really, really enjoyable. When obviously we came in, we were in a perilous position, but we believed with the infrastructure of the club, with the ownership group, with what we have in the building, we were going to consolidate last year, lay foundations to then hopefully really move forward this year. We knew it was a really important time, so we had to come in quickly, evaluate, get results very, very quickly. We managed to turn an environment that hadn't been productive into one that went 14 games unbeaten. So that was a real positive. So that gave us just a platform to say, hey, we've kind of not going backwards. We've kind of stopped that. Now we have to turn this tanker, this juggernaut around, and then get some forward momentum. So that's what I think we've started to do. We've got a wonderful environment. We've made big changes. The club have backed us. People around the club have done so much work in terms of changing the culture and the environment around here. A lot of new staff, an influx of players, obviously a big turnaround in playing staff as well as coaching staff and supplementary staff and everything. So we believe we've turned it around very quickly, and now hopefully we can start really taking the club forward.
Jim, how do you think things have changed over the last year, and what would you say are the goals on the pitch for the next year?
Well, the goals on the pitch are to win as many football matches as we possibly can. I think things have changed tremendously. I think Nathan's been a catalyst of that since he came in. We employ some great people here at the training ground. We think in terms of what we've got here in terms of bodies and people here and their work ethic, we think we're certainly championship ready. But the hopes and aspirations are to win as many football matches as we can. That is the business that we're ultimately in. The ownership have invested considerably in the facilities here, in terms of the pitches and the personnel, so we're ready to go. We're in a good place. We don't rest on our laurels. We look to improve every single day that we come in. But, the way that we behave, the way that we conduct ourselves, we think we've got every chance of winning more football matches than we probably lose.
Okay, we've had some questions submitted already by fans, but if you're watching and you haven't submitted a question but you'd like to, you can still get involved, and we'd love to hear from you. So, how to do that? Via WhatsApp. The number on the screen is 07384 517 580. That's 07384 517 580. Nathan, looking at the performance this season, the results, and digging a little bit deeper into that, what definitely stands out from my point of view is 10 clean sheets in the league already, just 5 achieved in the whole of last season. How have you and the team been able to achieve that?
Well, look, from the moment we came in, we wanted to make this a tougher place for teams to come to. We wanted to be, you can't leak goals and expect to score 3 every game. So we start basically by laying a foundation, by having a platform to give us the opportunity to win football games. By doing that starts with the defensive side, the way you press, how organised you are, and then from there, then you can start to build a fluent platform. You start to build a team that can score goals, that can be aggressive, and so on. So that's what we've done. We've worked religiously on the training pitch. Our defensive record is excellent. We're a very good, very difficult side to play against, out of possession. So now we've got to that point. So now for us, moving forward, it's about becoming a much more fluid, a much more creative football side. But I believe that if you build a real fluid structure, but you're still conceding goals, then you're not going to win the games you need to. So that's what we've done. We think we've built a very strong foundation here, and now from there gives us that opportunity to have a springboard to go and be a creative side.
And the first question from some supporters was a pre-submitted one from Steve. There are a few people asking, in fact, about loans, and specifically why Charlton haven't explored the loan market in more detail. Some reference to previous success that the club had with loan players, Jezrak Saki, Conor Gallagher, Josh Cullen, Christian Bielik, of course, but also Louis Barry has been mentioned by Alan as someone that's clearly made a massive impact for a team in the same league this season.
Can I answer that? Because it's something that's really close to I think. I totally get the whole idea around loans, and we are not adverse to doing that. But what we want to build here is something that we create our own. We build our own here. So we have a fantastic academy, which we invest a lot of money in. We want to promote our young players, because when we take loans, what we do is we develop players for other clubs. So we would rather here, we have a policy here that we get our own, so we bring our own players in, we develop those, and then we make them better, but we then own those players. then any room or any scope that we need, we always look first thing what's underneath, what can come through, so that we can promote ours. Now, if there is nothing coming through in that particular position or that particular time, if there is no one we can get permanently to develop for ourselves, then absolutely we will look to get some short-term quality to improve performances, which help us move forward. But ultimately, our goal will be moving forward, is to develop, enhance, purchase, recruit our own players for Charlton Athletic, because that is the only way we get stronger.
I think the loans market is getting more difficult as well, and I think Nathan and I have been doing this a long time, and we could all come up with examples of loans that worked out really, really well for us. But I think if we really sat down and thought about it, we could think of a lot more loans that haven't worked out well for us, probably. And, we've all got more substitutes now. Squads are getting bigger. Clubs are more reluctant to let their younger players out. It's a difficult... January is probably a better market for loans for all the reasons that Nathan expressed a few moments ago. It's really important that they've got to be better than young players that we've currently got in our academy at the moment. And that often, isn't the case. So that's desperately important to us. And you've got to also bear in mind that, when the players that have done fantastically well at this club, like Waxaki and Conor Gallagher and players such as that, they've performed really well on the pitch for this football club. But don't forget, this football club has never shared in the value of those players. When that value has been uplifted, Conor Gallagher goes to Atletico or Waxaki moves on, or any of these people, we've had the benefit of them, which the football club has paid for at the time. But there's no uplifting value to us. So effectively, we're getting charged to develop, the Premier League, the majority of the times, their players. So there's a whole philosophical conversation that I'll happily have with you on a podcast about should the EFL actually be taking loan players from the Premier League. But that's going in a different tangent for another podcast, I would suggest.
Yeah, you probably, if you listed the top 5 loanees from across the EFL this season, 3 or 4 of them have been pulled back in January and either sold off or sent elsewhere as well. So that is something that can affect
I think is either happening or likely to happen with Barry, isn't it?
It has, yeah. He's already been recalled.
There you go.
Waiting to see where he goes. But I suppose from your point of view, you can get someone else in for the second half of the season, but they're joining a team that's already established and has its partnerships, rather than in the summer when they maybe have a bit more of a run up to it.
But also we want to build long-term success here, and to do that we have to develop our own players, and we have one of the most wonderful academies here as well. Now that's what we want to do, and that's the plan. Yes, we will take them for short-term gain if that is the thing. But ultimately, as to repeat, not to keep on, but we want to build our own football club here, where we develop our own players, where anyone we bring in is a permanent, so that we get the complete value of each individual.
Got a couple more on individual players, and then we've got a few on the stadium and the pitch and things of that nature. A couple of questions on Ghassan Ahadme. Graham and Steve and Martin sending in questions on this topic. Jim just asking what, as you guys see it, Ghassan brings to the team, and if he's still regarded as value for money and a good signing for the club.
Well, I'll hand over to Nathan. I can answer a bit of that question, but I think Nathan has to answer the sort of football technical questions. We signed Ghassan on a long-term contract because we believe in Ghassan. He's been incredibly unfortunate this season, quite frankly, and his season hasn't got going to date. He came in, he hadn't really done any pre-season, he got injured very quickly, he got a terrible injury at Bristol Rovers which set him back. So he's had a very stop-start season. But, we believe in Ghassan. Ghassan we signed in the long term. The fans haven't seen the best of Ghassan yet, and nobody is more frustrated about that than Ghassan himself, who holds himself to the very highest standards. But I'll hand over to Nathan to talk about the sort of playing specifics.
I think Jim's covered it perfectly. You don't sign players just for... You'd like to be instant, success, but he came... he played for Cambridge last year. He was at Ipswich, didn't have any pre-season. Took a long time to get the deal over the line. So when he's come in, as I said, it's just been... His season's been curtailed a little bit through injuries, but it's a long-term plan with Ghassan. He's a number 9. He's 23 years of age. He's got a really good profile, and he's someone that will eventually do well for the football club. If we're just judging him on right now, then we feel like that's unfair and that's a little bit difficult. But you can see what attributes he has, and this is a developing environment. Anyone who's in here will get better over time, and that's the way we feel about Ghassan.
And as we're at the top of the pitch, I'll link in this question. A few fans asking about Alfie May. Obviously, it was a big decision in the summer for Alfie to leave the club. The questions are essentially around whether you feel, sitting here now, that it was the correct decision, and if you feel that he's been replaced.
I mean, if I answer that again from a sort of financial aspect, and Nathan can talk about the football, I think the thing that you've got to bear in mind with that particular transfer is Alfie wanted to go. I mean, that is ultimately the driving force. We weren't forcing Alfie out the door, and that's not being negative about Alfie. I think the world of him. I've seen him recently, but the sort of numbers that were on offer for Alfie were life changing for him, and I totally get it. But he made it very clear that he wanted to explore his options, and we managed to monetize that as well as we possibly could have done. And I think from a financial point of view, I think it was a very good deal for the football club. It was unlikely that Alfie had a year left on his contract. I think we'd be having a different conversation right now about, Alfie's got 6 months left, what's going to happen. So the fact that Alfie was, the driving force in that, as he's been very straightforward and honest about, my job then just becomes monetising that deal in itself.
I feel we're in a stronger position. If you can't be relying on one player and so on. I had a fantastic relationship with Alfie. He did fantastically well for this football club. When I came in, I played him. We ensured he got the golden boot. There would have been a contract conversation, but Alfie made it clear that he wanted to move. It was right for him financially. Eventually, we, for the club, got the right move and the right deal for the club. So there was nothing really. It was out of our hands. We'd have been fighting a losing battle because you said you had to protect the asset. We then feel we went out and definitely strengthened and signed. The striking department is better than it was last year. I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about the striking department. And then we've got the emergence of two fantastic young players at the football club, where we've got Tyrese Campbell now, who is attracting interest from considerably higher up the pyramid. And these are young players we believe in and develop. And we have a very good striking department. When coming back to Gassan in terms of that, there's real competition in that department. There really is. What we have to do is be the fluent football inside and create those chances so that these strikers can then become the ones we are. But we feel we're in a really good place. It's not about one individual. This club has lost individuals in the past. This club signs individuals. We have to make sure that the whole football club moves forward. And to be fair, selling Alfie May was the right decision for every party, and that was discussed extensively with the player, with the agent, with us, with the proposed clubs. So, yeah, it was. And to be fair, I don't think we should be talking about Alfie May now. I think we should be looking forward, not backwards. This club has some exciting players. You look at the emergence of Tyrese Campbell and Miles Lieben as two young strikers, Daniel Kanu coming up. We've got great competition. Tyrese Campbell's been a revelation. The world's the oyster for that boy. So I think I would rather talk about the positives that we have rather than looking back at someone who was here for a year that did fantastically well, but made it quite plain that they want to move on.
Dan's asked about Thierry Small, but also Tyrese Campbell, saying with them being key to the recent run, providing pace and width, if the club are looking to add more pace and width this month.
We'd always want pace, power, athleticism. That's big fundamentals to how we recruit. Now, both of these players are playing in positions that they're not renowned for playing in. So again, we go back to the environment we have here, development. We trust, we bold, we brave. We think we can play Tyrese Campbell central. No one else has played him central. We do, because we think that's his best position. Thierry gives us something really like a natural ability. We've tried to tweak certain things so that we can get our good, our potent players in the team, and he's in a wonderful place at the minute. But it's somewhere that he's never played before. So one, that's going to take time. Two, we have to have a little bit of understanding. But right now, he's given us everything. He's, the honesty he gives us, and he's only just turned 20 years of age. He had a meteoric start to his career. Probably plateaued for a long period. Now he's found a home. Now he finds people that care about him, that tell him he can be anything, that work with him day in, day out. So that's what we want to do with our players, and that's why we back ourselves in our environment.
He says he's found a home here. A number of fans asking if there are any updates on either his contract situation or that of Lloyd Jones, whose contracts expire at the end of the season.
Yeah, no, listen, we're in ongoing negotiations. to extend the stay of both of their players. We really want them to stay. And it's just the normal back and forth, to be honest with you. But I am very hopeful that both will be staying with us in the long term, as they're both really important to us.
Another question for you, Jim. A lot of people have been in touch about, including Stuart, is the poor state of the new pitch. They ask what the club's view on it is, especially given the expense, and how it can be improved.
Well, nobody more than I I'm disappointed in the state of the pitch. There's no two ways about that. We heralded it at the start of the season. We were fortunate to get a substantial grant from the Premier League Stadium Fund to aid us, which part of that was enabling the women to play all their games at the stadium, which is great. And it hasn't quite worked out the way this season that we would have liked. I mean, there's no shying away from that. You can see that yourself. But we've taken what remedies we can this time of year. But of course, it's incredibly difficult because the grass isn't growing. So we will make the best of it. We possibly can. Clearly, we get into March, matters will be a little bit better. And I'm sure by the end of the season, frustratingly, hopefully where we're playing a playoff semi-final on the pitch, it'll be absolutely fantastic. But we think we know where, issues have arisen between ourselves and the contractors. We probably started the process a little bit late. We're not actually unique in this. If you look around the country, that teams that have had brand new hybrid pitches installed last summer, not necessarily from the same contractors or even the same hybrid pitch, quite a few of these football clubs have had major problems that none of us were expecting. There's a little bit of a debate going on about the absolute reasons why and why not. But look, we're disappointed about it. It will be much better next season. We've got a much longer growing in time. But look, we're thrilled that we did it. It was the right thing to do. Hasn't quite worked out the way we wanted at the moment. But in the short to medium to long term, it will prove to be a real asset for the football club.
And last one, while I have you guys, it's another one for you, Jim. A lot of questions on this. Can you give an update on the status of the ownership of the club's stadium and training ground?
Sure. We're in negotiations with the freeholder, basically the landlord, who obviously, for people that aren't quite aware, owns the stadium and the training ground. Negotiations are going well. They're positive. They're courteous. I mean, these things don't happen particularly quickly. We had a meeting with them just before Christmas, and I think we're due another one relatively shortly. But conversations have been going in the right direction, I would suggest. It's been done in a very cordial fashion. And like most things that are commercial, there will be an answer in there somewhere that just needs to be fathomed out. But, I understand completely the fans' willingness to want some kind of resolution and hard answer, which we will get to eventually. But these things, it's a fairly big property transaction, and these things take time. But we've been treated very well by the landlord. Hopefully we're doing likewise. And as with all these things, I'm always positive that there is an outcome that suits all parties. But yeah, it's moving in the right direction.
There is time for one more before we head back to Charlotte in the Charlton TV studio. Is there any update, or rather, sorry, I should rephrase that. Peter, Mark and a few others have asked if Andy Scott is still at the club, and if so, what his role is.
No, Andy Scott absolutely is at the football club. Andy Scott could be sat here tonight quite happily, but it just happens to be that we are in the middle of a transfer window, and Andy is out day and night watching football matches at the moment, putting miles on his car. So no, Andy is here. He's an incredibly valuable member of our team here at Sparrows Lane, and we all work together in tandem.
Fantastic. That is the last question we had time for here at the training ground. There is still plenty of time to get more questions in to Gavin and to Charlie back in the Charlton TV studio. Nathan, Jim, thank you for having me here today. And thank you for your time as well.
Thank you. Cheers, thank you.
Let's head back to Charlotte in the studio.
Thank you so much, Ali, and to Nathan and Jim as well. I don't know if anyone else noticed as well, but what a lovely sight to see. That injury section of the board with no players noted on it. How important that could be over the next few months as well. Thank you to all the supporters who are sending in their questions on WhatsApp for the guests alongside me. We are going to get through them as the show goes on, but we have had a message come in. It says here, not a question, but please can I give a huge shout out to all our fans who have supported with donations for the sensory room in the past couple of days. Our fans are amazing. We couldn't achieve what we do without your support, and that is thanks from Daniela and Jade. So a really important message that I wanted to squeeze in, because we have got a lot to get through, and I'm really pleased to say now that we are joined by two supporters who are going to pose their questions to Charlie and Gavin. So it is a very warm welcome to fan advocate Lucy Bishop and Heather Alderson, who joins us from the Charlton Athletic Supporters Trust. Thank you both. Lovely to see you. Thank you for giving up your time to be with us this evening. I know you've got lots of questions that you want to ask, so shall we get straight into it? And Heather, I'll come to you first, please.
Thanks. Now, these are the questions that are going to be for Gavin and Charlie. And so, first of all, before we get into the fan questions, what do you imagine the most popular fan question is going to be for you both as the chair and chief executive? And what's the answer?
Heather, I would say this is all about the fans tonight, so I wouldn't want to second guess what those questions would be. So I'll leave it down to you to represent the fans and ask the questions.
Is that the same answer from Charlie, or are we going to crack on?
Given that Gavin is himself a fan, I'm very hesitant to second guess him, and he asks me lots of questions all the time, but probably not the right place to rehearse all of those right here. But looking at Charlotte's list, there's a bewildering number of them across lots of different areas. So, and that's before we even get into the ones that you've got stored up for us, Heather. So let's hear what they are, and we'll do our best to answer them.
Yeah, I think you spoke at the intro about your challenges and achievements around taking over from the club. But I think it's one of those questions, it's almost like, if you were to take away one thing that you've done and told other people about it as a way of persuading them to become a Charlton fan, what would it be?
It's a good question. Yeah. I mean, you're in the day-to-day, Charlie. I mean, what do you say?
Well, I just sort of track back a little bit here and say, look, we as the current custodians of the club have inherited an absolutely fantastic fan base. Not only quite a sizable fan base, but also an extremely committed fan base, and also a very knowledgeable fan base. And one of the most enjoyable facets of the year or so that I've been sort of really actively involved here, obviously prior to that I was one of the owners, has actually been just meeting lots of Charlton fans and hearing bits of advice, suggestions, ideas, many of which we have been able to take forward. And I think with the advisory board that we'll be talking about later on, that gives us a more structured way of being able to interact with the fan base, which I think will put Charlton in the front rank of clubs in terms of the coherence, as it were, between the board and the fans. So if I was speaking to somebody about becoming a Charlton fan, I'd say, this is a club where your voice is going to be heard. It's a voice where, the management and in fact the chairman are extremely available. I make a point before every single game of hanging around in the fan zone for half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, just speaking to people and being available. And Gavin, absolutely remarkable. Flies over here from Canada, once or twice a month, and is again extremely available to people. So this is going to be a club where, being a fan, you are an integral part of the club, as opposed to just being, as other clubs, a customer or a legacy fan or whatever it might be. Everything that we want to do in conjunction with the fans, and part of the advisory board's role is going to be helping us as a board and a management determine what the priorities are going to be for the club going forward. Because we don't have a monopoly on wisdom, and the bit that I certainly don't have a monopoly on wisdom of is what it means to be a Charlton fan, because I'm historically not a Charlton fan. Having Gavin here is really helpful on a day-to-day basis, but we do want to get that much broader spread of opinion and passion applied more inside the club, rather than being a force which sits slightly separate to their own club. So I think that is going to be a massive theme of the next 6 months, a year, is the bringing back together of Charlton as an entity. And the work that Gavin and Steve Brown have been doing with the Former Players Association is part of that as well, because we are a football club. And a football club is, it's originally about footballers and about football. So there's just lots of stuff going on which is about the reintegration of the club. that I think is going to make us a much more powerful force than perhaps has been the case over the last 10 to 15 years here.
Heather, thank you for that question. Lucy, let's come over to you next for your first question for the guys.
Hi everyone, nice to be with you this evening. I'm just going to preface this by saying I've had some technical difficulties, so I haven't heard what's gone before, and I'm not able to hear Heather. But I trust that her questions were, as ever, absolutely fantastic. And from your answer, I think the question was probably along the lines of fan engagement and bringing the fans along on the journey. So I'm going to try and pick up on that theme of alignment. I've been keeping an eye on various feeds as tonight's been progressing, and it hasn't gone unnoticed by fans that there's two of you there in the stadium, and we've got James and Nathan down at the training ground, which may be purely logistical and due to where you're based during the day, but there's been a bit of speculation. So I was just hoping you could go into a little bit more detail on the sort of alignment between boardroom and dressing room and how you're delivering a unified approach, how you work together day to day, and if you've got any examples of challenges that you've faced and how you've overcome them as a team.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, look, it is logistical. I mean, Nathan and Jim are in the middle of a transfer window, and they're at Sparrows Day, from the crack of dawn, right through into the evening. We wanted to make sure Nathan was available as well, and there's only so much room here, so totally logistical that. It is our vision to be the most cohesive, sustainable, community-driven football club operating at an elite level. So 4 words very important there. The first one, cohesion, and it's very important that as a board, as an executive team, as an extended management team, that there is cohesion. That starts with a lot of communication. It starts with clear objectives, key performance indicators that are rolled out across the club. And I think the governance structure which has been implemented over the last 6 months or so has now really bedded in, and those communication channels are incredibly open. There's not a day that goes by where I'm not speaking to every member of the Charlton board. The majority of days I'm speaking to the wider ownership group as well as members that aren't on the board, senior management like Andy, like Nathan. But it's a football club, and there are many challenges, whether that's player availability. Charlie talked about the cyber incident earlier on. That I think is a really good example of something which was very, very delicate to manage, could have impacted match day operations. It took a lot of coordination at a board level on the ground here at the Valley, to make sure that that the football club continued to operate. And that cyber incident didn't impact the day-to-day operations or our ability to put on a football match. Lessons are learnt from that. Many businesses suffer cyber attacks. Many businesses don't know that they suffered a cyber attack when indeed they have suffered one. So these are the sorts of challenges that will go unseen and perhaps unnoticed by the wider fan base, but that's the sort of example where if you don't have cohesion, then you're not able to work through that successfully. So many examples, but that was a particularly acute one which everybody at the football club had to come together from the board all the way down.
I think if I might address the root of the question, right, which is the extent to which the team at Sparrows Lane and the team at the Valley need to be together and the extent to which we need to be apart. Effectively, a football business is 2 separate businesses, and they are quite different. So on the one hand, you've got a fairly conventional business, albeit quite a multifaceted one. So you've got a retail operation, you've got a hospitality operation, you've got a food and beverage operation, you've got a sponsorship operation, you've got an operations operation in terms of putting on live events and dealing with, this today at the Valley was the safety advisory group meeting, dealing with in terms of how we actually steward and police games and all this type of stuff. And I think it's important that me and the team at the Valley focus on our jobs. We've got significant jobs to do here, and no one at Sparrows Lane will thank us here for hanging around Sparrows Lane trying to watch football. That's not our job. Our job is to make sure that this place here, this office operation and this stadium operation runs well, and we improve the fan experience, and that we make sure that when the players do turn up, they're turning up to a stadium that works, that operates, that has fans in it, hopefully who are reasonably happy, to improve every element of that. So that's, I think, just something to make quite clear, is that the sports performance operation and the business operation are two quite different things. And effectively, with me running the operation here at the Valley and Jim and Nathan running the operation at Sparrows Lane, you've got people who are staying in their lanes and actually doing the things they're qualified to do. That's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is you then hopefully then build the professional respect on both sides, that you know what you're doing and you are focused on what you're doing, and you're then able to come together in a sort of atmosphere of respect when there are things that you need to do together, which there are on a regular basis. And the finance director and I were over at Sparrows Lane at the start of the transfer window, because there are financial implications for transfer window, which feed into the broader budgeting and all that type of stuff. So we do need to be there sometimes for that conversation. But once that conversation has been had, it's then up to us to wait for an update. It's not up to us to sort of hang around there, like an unwanted smell. So there's just a sort of a nice balance there. I hope that the good thing is that most of us are reasonably experienced in the positions which we hold and have been through some of the challenges that do come with keeping football, creating cohesion in a football club, and are therefore sensitive to the various different areas which to where not to tread and where not to tread too heavily, but equally sometimes, like anyone, sometimes just to ask a challenging question. Now Nathan, more than any other manager, is so open to polite questioning and challenge. Nathan will turn up to a board meeting, which a lot of managers don't do, and will very transparently lay out what his plans are and seek input from other people. We have on our board in Paul Elliott a former super elite footballer. Anyone would be foolish not to be interested in what Paul Elliott thinks about football. He's played at the very, very top level. But does that mean that that we would want Paul to actually become a sort of proto-manager? No, and Paul wouldn't want that either. So everyone has their positions, everyone has their roles. There's a governance structure in place. There are targets in place, key performance indicators in place across the whole business. And I think it's important that we all focus on what our KPIs are, not getting too involved in what other people's sort of short-term targets and their short-term actions are.
Thank you, Lucy. Heather, we will come back to you for your second question, please.
So today, a new sign appeared at the on the cupboard end, which says "All different, all together, all Charlton." I think the supporters would like to know what the role of that sign is and what it means to you both personally.
Do you want to start, Charlie? And then
I think as a Charlton fan, I think it's probably good for you to start with all the history that you have with the club.
Yeah, I think, look, I mean, we have a long history of equality and diversity here at Charlton. We've seen that on the pitch, we see that in the fan base. I think it's important to embrace that, and I think for embracing that, Paul will teach me about diversity of thought, and different experiences, and that combined makes us a better operation. And I think it is about embracing our community where we are here in southeast London, and looking to be perhaps a leading light in that. We've won awards in this area. We're working with the EFL on a nationwide diversity project at the moment. They've chosen Charlton to work with, so we are well recognised in this, and we've had some serious success embracing diversity.
Yeah, I mean, look, I echo everything that Gavin said. I don't need to repeat it. It's not just a commercial point. It's also the right thing to do, and makes us a stronger organisation. But it is also commercially necessary as well. If we want Charlton to be as big as it possibly can be, if we want Charlton to become a truly big club as well as a great club, then we need to embrace as many potential fans as possible, right? For the club to truly represent the local community, because the local community is really big, right? So we've just been spending some time visiting clubs in the northeast, where there's another club in every single mill town, every 150,000 people there's another football club, because that's where professional football was born, etc. We're in a place where our catchment area here, in terms of the total number of population for whom Charlton's the nearest club, is pretty much as big as anywhere in the country. But it does include an awful lot of people whose families are not necessarily multi-generationally from South East London, which means that although there's a huge opportunity for Charlton, there's also a big challenge, because not every single person and every single family in our local communities are coming from 3 to 4 generation of Charlton fandom. So really our diversity approach is partially continuing the ethos of Charlton, which has been there for so long, and making sure that that's encouraged and brought forward, and our colleague Paul Elliott is the board member responsible for doing that. But as chief executive, it's also a hugely exciting opportunity to actually just grow the size of our business, which in the end is what will enable us to put more money onto the pitch as well, which is the point of a football business.
Great question, Heather. Thank you so much. I'm conscious time is just flying, as it always does when we have these meetings. So Lucy, if I'll come to you for a final question, please.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I still can't hear Heather. So I think she asked. I think the question was about growing the club and the fan base. So I'll go down. I'll sort of take that down a sustainability route and just sort of look for some assurances really for fans on what measures, what steps are being taken to ensure the financial stability and sustainability of the club.
Well, look, that's a subject very dear to my heart, as a lot of people will know. I grew up following a club that was in and out of bankruptcy on a continual basis. Charlton's had its own challenges in these areas in the past, and it's debilitating, it's destabilising. I've got a lot of friends from back home who are Reading fans who just are living through constant threat of their club, ceasing to exist, and it's just a really bad place to be. So financial sustainability is not just a question of, can the owners lose a bit less money, that type of stuff. It's actually existential. A really well-run football club is one that can stand on its own 2 feet. And when the owners of that football club choose to invest, they do so in a deliberative way. Let's improve the stadium. Let's put some more money into the academy. Let's do something really interesting in terms of, growing our fan base with our marketing budgets, etc. Poorly run clubs tend to be more like black holes, where the owner's constantly having to sort of, bail out the water and trying to sort of keep the whole thing inside. So is that going to be achieved in one fell swoop? No. That's never going to be the case. It's Rome is going to be built, but not in one day. It's going to be built in several. So first of all, it's about keeping those revenues increasing, but doing so in a sensitive way. There's no point in just jacking up prices all the time. You've got to try and improve the product, improve the experience, and gradually hope that more people engage with it. And it's great to see attendances up by so much this season. We inherited an average crowd of around about 13,500. We're up about 15,200 this year, which is, a really good step in the right direction. But it is just the first step, right? So part of the sustainability is growing the size of the fan base. Another part of sustainability is making the experience here better, so that people want to come and spend their money here. And the fan zone has been a really big boost for us in revenue terms this year, and an example of, if we do keep on improving the experience, then people will. I think same with the club shop. Club shop revenues are almost double this year what they were last year. So we've got to be focused constantly on increasing revenues and holding down the cost of the non-football operation. That then generates the ability to spend money on the pitch, to improve the team, to improve the results, to improve the performances, which in turn also increases the revenues. So it's not going to be done in one go, but we have it constantly in our eyes' sight, because as Gavin said, our vision is to become a coherent, sustainable club, right? And that is something which we believe is in the long-term interest club. Now, there's something which also needs to be put on the table, which is that cost controls within football are becoming tighter and tighter and tighter. And that's only going in one direction with the advent of the government football regulator, right? It is being made very clear to us at the various conferences we attend, the EFL conferences. I was at the annual EFL event in Parliament this week, which the Secretary of State addressed and the Sports Minister addressed. As a result of the football regulator bill, there will be at some point a redistribution of TV revenues, but that's going to come with even tighter spending constraints on the Football League clubs, right? So in terms of being allowed to spend only a percentage of your revenues on your first team. So our revenues have to grow, because that's the measure which is going to be used in future, is you're only allowed to spend a percentage of your revenues in the first team. And at the same time, we have to just keep constantly being very, very careful not to allow it to become a gold-plated operation where it's all sort of, everyone feels that they can sort of, spend a lot of money on everything, because much as that might seem like a fun thing to do at the moment, there's a hangover from that which comes down the track.
And Gavin, I suppose as a lifelong addict yourself, sustainability is probably right up there when you have this responsibility now as chair, a guiding principle for you in the decisions that you and the board make.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it was the leading motivation for me getting involved, to be honest with you, to make sure that, the club could be sustainable. We've all read and seen examples where football clubs have not been run well, and some football clubs, Bury and others, no longer being around. I mean, sustainability, as Charlie said and I said earlier, is one of the sort of 4 pillars of our vision statement. That decision framework in everything that we're doing, it comes in many, many forms. We talked earlier on about lease negotiations here, security of tenure over the stadium. Nathan talked about developing our players, so developing our academies, making sure that they have a pathway to make sure we've got sustainability there, whether it's the squad management approach, so the 8+8+8, to make sure that we're doing that in a sustainable way. So there's many threads to sustainability, but because it is one of the 4 pillars of our vision statement, it is in that decision framework. It does run throughout all the decision making and thinking.
So I'll give you an example. So, at the moment we're working with RSK, our sponsors, on what will hopefully be a major project to put photovoltaic panels on our roofs here, which not only is obviously good from an environmental sustainability point of view, but is also going to reduce the club's utility bills over the next few years, which helps hold the costs down. So there's just a lot of stuff that needs to be done to try and help the club towards being the sustainable club we want it to be.
Yeah. Heather and Lucy, thank you so much for giving up your time to be with us this evening. I think that's a really important segment to have you both here asking the questions. Hopefully see you both soon at the Valley. Take care.
See you Saturday.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Thanks, guys.
And I do think it's really important that we have supporters directly asking you their questions, because even having this meeting itself, Gavin, is a part of a wider fan engagement strategy, which was unveiled, I think, around September time.
Yeah.
For supporters that might not be aware, can you kind of talk us through it and what the strategy is all about?
Yeah, look, we've spent a long time thinking about fan engagement, working with CAST, the fan advocates, and forming a framework for fan engagement. We published this back in late September with it, and you kind of think of it as a pyramid here. In fact, it's on the screen. So, that supporter liaison officer, Isabel Rogerson, has recently been recruited at the club. We feel really, really good about that employment, about that recruitment. She's there day to day to listen to fans. So you can contact Isabel on fans@cafc.co.uk. The types of things that you may want to contact her about would be things like disability parking or particular questions around a match day. We've then got this biannual meeting. So this is the 3rd one we've done. And we've announced these dates well in advance. So back in September, this was a meeting that was announced, and we'll announce the summer meeting as well in due course. So that will be a structure which we'll continue to be very committed to. The fan advocates, previously known as the fan advisors. So Lucy, we just had Lucy and Lewis as the fan advocates there. They are there to give us the constant voice of the supporter. The execs will speak to the fan
Very
advocates,
regular basis.
whether it be news strip, whether it be messaging. The fan advocates are heavily involved in the club. In fact, I was on a Zoom call with Lucy earlier on today about the ex-player association, so they're very involved in that. So that is a direct connection into the fan base. We then have the biannual supporter forum, which we held the first one late last year, which is a in-person event here at the Valley, where you can ask the operational executives questions around the club's operations. And that is a forum to talk about stadium improvements, perhaps frustrations, issues which we need to address in that place. And then we've got the task and complete groups that are finite projects where we are looking at organising around a particular objective, where we will bring in supporters or particular experts around, as I say, finite projects. So an example of that would be bringing the club shop in-house, a finite project. How do we involve and engage with supporters and other experts on that? And then really the pinnacle of this fan engagement network is the advisory board. And the advisory board is the Charlton Advisory Board. We're looking to do things in a sort of very Charlton way. Many clubs have solely fan advisory boards. Ours is broader than just fan engagement. So we've got the community trust, we've got the supporters trust, we've got the fan representatives that we've just held the election on that, as well as a representative from the hospitality group and as well as ex-players, So ex-players. So Steve Brown sits on that advisory board, which is just about to hold its inaugural meeting, and that advisory board is there to advise and counsel the CAFC board on matters which we will direct them to, but as well matters that they want to advise us on, which would be up to them to choose.
Well, thank you so much for talking us through that, because I think there are two things that every football fan wants, and that is to see their football team winning as many games as possible, and secondly, to feel that their football club really cares about them. And looking at that structure there, it hopefully highlights for supporters joining us the layers of engagement that's going in around this fan engagement plan. And for anyone that wants to follow up and read about it in more detail, you can do so by visiting the club website. And Gavin mentioned it there. Over the last few weeks, Charlton supporters have been voting for the two fans they would like to represent them to join the new Charlton Advisory Board. Supporters were invited, the fan base, to put themselves forward. A shortlist was whittled down to 5 individuals, and the voting has been taking place, and I can reveal now the 2 supporters that fans have chosen to represent them on the Charlton Advisory Board are John Whitfield and Lewis Catt. So a massive congratulations to John and Lewis. The new advisory board will be meeting shortly for the first time. And as Gavin explained there, it's not just those 2, of course. There's representatives from the Charlton Athletic Community Trust, the Charlton Athletic Supporters Trust, and our Ex-Players Association as well. Confirmation of those 2 appointments will be on our website tomorrow morning, so you can read even more about it. Right, the WhatsApp questions have been coming through thick and fast. I'm going to try and get through as many of them in the time that we have. So where shall we start? Okay, so this question is from Alan for you, Charlie. You mentioned last year about the fan experience on match day, beer express queues and the vending machines have been great. However, the fundamental issue is the staff operating them. It's incredibly frustrating that every week there are not enough staff on the tills, and the ones that are would rather pour half pints than actually serve the customers. So how are you going to improve the experience?
Well, I want to be respectful here, but we inherited an outsourced catering contract, which means that the food and beverage at the stadium is delivered by a third party, and that's contractual. Right, so it's not on a match by match basis. They actually effectively have ownership of the stadium. So even if, as an executive team, we want to take a room here to have a meeting in outside of our own direct offices, we effectively have to go and ask permission to hire that room for ourselves. So it's a fairly comprehensive outsourcing that was agreed to under the previous ownership, which doesn't really give us the leverage that we would like to be able to make the force, let's say, the improvements we want. We can put infrastructural changes in place. We can say, right, we're going to invest money in a vending machine, or we're going to do this or whatever. But when it comes to the recruitment, the management, the overseeing of staff, that is not our job. Effectively, what happens is we get a log of all the complaints, and there are a lot, and we then have to go through them subsequently with our outsourced catering providers to ask if they may improve the situation, right? So that's the current process. We are looking forward to a review of these arrangements. Contractually, I can't go into too much at this point, but rather like with the retail situation, fundamentally, this is only going to work if we've got more control over it. We have to have more control over it. I absolutely ascribe to that complaint. I don't think it's good enough. I walk round every match. I see the same problems. I see the same things. it will be sorted. Contractually, it's requires a little bit of work, like the retail situation did last summer. But I am confident that we will get to a better place in time for next season.
Next question. So for supporters who aren't aware, Gavin in December was appointed the chair of the board here at Charlton Athletic. Is a lifelong Charlton Athletic supporter, and we've had a question coming, Gavin, for you. How engaged are the club with the principal owners? Are they simply dispassionate money men, or are they invested emotionally in our performance and our future?
Well, they're definitely invested emotionally. Every single game is watched by the ownership. It's a very lively WhatsApp group that we have there. They love coming to the Valley. They've all been to the Valley to watch various games. They've each got their view on our playing style, and they've got their favourite players. They are very engaged in the football. They're also very engaged in the whole operation. There's not really a day that goes past where I'm not speaking to one or more of the owners. I think the structure which we've got now is working really well, so that communication is streamlined bi-directionally. But no, incredibly engaged. When they've been here, they've visited the museum, they're learning the history of Charlton. They were not Charlton fans before they invested and purchased a football club, but each and every one of them, is becoming Charlton fans, and they love it. And it's not just the men's team. They watch the women's team, and they watch the under-21s when they can, knowing they're incredibly engaged.
Gavin, as a bit of a follow-up, it's not one that's come on WhatsApp, but part of my job, and it's one of my favourite bits, is getting out and talking to supporters. And so many times, pre-match, post-match, I hear this phrase of Charlton Athletic when it gets in your blood. Do you think the owners themselves have been surprised in quite how much they've fallen in love with the club and the ethos of what it's all about, not just when they're here at the Valley, of course, but when they're further afield?
Absolutely, definitely so. Because don't forget that two of our owners were previously involved in a Major League Soccer club, and proud owners of it for quite a considerable period of time. But I think perhaps they have been surprised at the extent to which an English league club really draws you in, with the big history and with how passionate the fans are. Because when they come here, they've been in the fans bar, obviously the museum, the fan zone, etc. And because they're not necessarily widely recognised by Charlton fans, it was quite a nice thing, because it enables them to enjoy it a little bit more when they do come over here, and to feel more like they are fans. So as Gavin says, the level of emotional engagement is absolutely very, very high. And sometimes I'm sort of watching these amazingly busy men sort of taking chunks of time out to watch a Tuesday evening game, which American time is halfway through the afternoon, and thinking, crikey Riley, some fairly important things are being put on hold here for you to watch this game. But yeah, that they are absolutely into this, and we couldn't wish for better owners. Obviously myself, I'm excluding myself from that judgment, but the other owners are very, very into it, and they're into it in the right way.
Yeah. Well, look, this studio here is based in the Alan Kirbishley stand, and Peter asks, why aren't the club interested in what Alan Kirbishley could add, given the comment made earlier about Paul Elliott's footballing credentials? I don't know if you want to take that.
So I speak to Curbs a lot.
Yeah.
Ever since I've been involved, I've spoken to Curbs and seek his counsel. Perhaps increasingly now as as chairman. Curbs is at almost every single home game. He's in the director's box with us. We talk about the game, before, after. He's incredibly engaged. So no one should think that we do not seek his counsel, or he's not totally on board with supporting Charlton and seeing us return to hopefully the heights that he was able to manage us to.
And we always get to hear from him, of course, on Charlton TV, our monthly roundup show, which is always a good watch, and you can catch up on episodes on YouTube if you haven't already. A number of people have asked about this, including Stuart, about the floodlights at the Valley.
Yep, the floodlights are, they meet the regulations, but clearly there are a few bulbs currently not working. The operations team are getting engineers to go up there to determine, we think there are probably a few slightly different causes between a few of the different bulbs and systems. So hopefully we're going to get an outcome on that quite soon. But we're absolutely within regulations, but obviously seeking to improve and to make sure that we have all of them working, as soon as possible.
Brilliant. And the great thing about these meetings as well is that we can put to bed some of the rumours, address them. So this is coming from Lee. He asks if the rumours are true about rugby being played at the Valley.
Well, rugby's been played at the Valley before. In fact, I remember coming to watch rugby at the Valley many, many years ago. And, you know, there have been the odd conversation with a rugby club who at some point might be interested in playing here. I think it's fair to say that with the pitch in its current sort of state of development, let's say, that it wouldn't be very wise to be considering playing rugby here right now. You know, we're moving from being a club that only plays men's games here to now playing women's games here and a significant number of under-21 games here as well. And the pitch needs to demonstrate that it's up to that level of usage. I would observe that there are other clubs using a very similar pitch infrastructure, like Bristol, for instance, that do play men's teams, women's teams, rugby, women's rugby, all sorts of things on their pitch. But really your pitch needs to be very robust to take that time. One thing we would never do is jeopardise, you know, the football environment for anything really. You know, the football environment is what we're a football business fundamentally, and anything else that we do has to be additive to the football business, not subtracting from it.
Yeah, and Charlie, when you were talking through the figures earlier, this point did come up, but I'm going to pose the question from Tom, which refers to the introduction of Sky Sports Plus, where selected Charlton games are shown on Sky. Has this had any negative implications on the club, and if so, what are they? Yeah,
I mean, primarily the streaming revenue's gone down. We've got one of the highest streaming revenues, if not the highest streaming revenue in the Football League. And, you know, it's actually gone down by less than we thought, but it has gone down. I think, you know, last season we were doing something like £480,000 of streaming revenue. Probably this season it's going to be down to, you know, more like 410, 415, depending on what happens for the rest of the season. In terms of live match attendance, you've got to believe that there is some sort of an impact, albeit that most fans were able to find a way to stream those games before, so I'm not kidding myself here, but maybe a small, but ultimately in the end, attendances this season are strongly up. So it's hard to say that that's been one, but the streaming bit, that definitely has had an impact.
I think maybe an impact on away attendance here at the Valley.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Gavin. Correct. So one thing we have noticed is that for clubs which are more than an hour and a half away, etc., we're starting to see, you know, some slightly smaller away crowds, and you know the ability, I think, for people to access stuff through VPNs as well, and this stuff is definitely having an impact, particularly on away crowds. Yeah,
and Charlie mentioned the point earlier as well about kick-off times changing too, so it is tough sometimes for supporters to keep up with all of that. And we've had a question asking, will there be any more events such as the open training sessions and the fun days, which again, I've managed to come along to a number of them. They're brilliant. So I'm hoping the answer is going to be yes, but you two can perhaps shed a bit of light.
Absolutely. I think they've been great successes and, really good engagement from everyone. So the family fun days are great and, watching the players train and stuff. So, yeah, absolutely.
Everything we can do to try and bring this club back together again has to be done. And part of that is enabling fans to actually meet the players. We've got, I think Nathan keeps on saying it, and he never says anything lightly, right? If he doesn't believe something, he won't say it. And he says, we've got a terrific group of lads, and we do. They are, of all the clubs I've been at, probably like the most sort of affable, decent group of people that I've seen. And the more fans that have the chance to meet them and understand, and vice versa, to grow that connection, to understand that we're all in this together. You know, the time when this club will really start motoring is when all the different parts of it come together.
Community driven.
Community driven. Like, I remember coming here as an away fan in the late 90s and 2000s when Charlton was so powerful, everyone knew that the whole of Charlton was together. So the work that Gavin and Steve have been doing on the Former Players Association, the work that's been going on to create the advisory board, the family fun days, the open train sessions, this is all part of a much broader thread that we just want to re-establish through the whole club, which starts to gently iron out some of the wrinkles and divisions that have grown up over the last decade or two, just enables people to feel, I can be a part of this. And that runs from Gavin and me. I mean, I speak to Alan Kirbishy regularly as well, but Gavin speaks to him very regularly, etc. Enabling Alan to feel, if I've got something to say, I know who to say it to and I know it will be taken seriously. Same with Brownie, etc. It's just enabling everyone to come back together again. It's really important.
Also, on that note, I recall when we've had this meeting before, supporters have asked about, can we get out into schools and do partnerships? And we recently relaunched that at Christmas, and all 4 of the first team players from both the men's and women's team were such incredible ambassadors for this football club. But equally, I think they really enjoyed being with the school children as well. And it's just about spreading that little seed of thought. I really want to go to the Valley, and it's brilliant to see. And I thought it was worth mentioning. So if supporters hadn't seen that just before Christmas, that is up and running and proving to be successful early on.
It's a very ambitious programme. Having a comprehensive schools programme throughout the local boroughs, on the one hand, really putting some oomph behind junior addicts on the other hand, and re-engaging with junior reds, the football bit of the junior operation which had drifted away from the club. All these things together is what starts again to regrow our roots within the local communities and enable people to have lots of different touch points with the club. You never quite know who's going to get hooked by which bit of it, but you've got to be out there on a constant basis, and it's a big part of what we need to do in the coming months and years.
We've had a few questions on how the club plans to grow the fan base, so hopefully that has covered that as well. We've had this question come in. At the moment, our away...
Not entirely covered it, because I think, we've also got to be very ambitious about our plans in Kent as well. We've got the Valley Express scheme. We've got to really back ourselves on this, right? I've spent quite a lot of time in Kent in the last year because I moved to South East London, and it's much easier to get down there than it was previously. And what's clear is that we are the main club in Kent. Sorry, Gillingham, we are the main club in Kent. And we need to really re-establish the habits and the touch points, and maybe in some cases working with the advisory board and with the supporters trust, some of the supporters branches that were in these towns in Kent, etc. Again, to just make sure that Charlton's constantly apparent within our catchment area, and enabling people to come, and potentially building out Valley Express a little bit broader again to make sure that people find it a bit easier to come to the Valley.
I think that at the same time, look, no one is under any illusions. Success out there on the pitch, is the most important factor there to engage fans. We're confident we're going to get that success on the pitch, so it's making sure that as that is coming together, that we've got all of these other channels being developed alongside that. But no illusions, it's got to happen out there.
Look, we are into the final 10 minutes of this meeting. The WhatsApp number is on the screen. Take the opportunity now, submit the questions, send it through. I've got my phone open, I've got plenty to get through, but still enough time to potentially answer yours. So this has come in. It says, our away shirt has a different sponsor to our home and third shirts. My understanding is that contractually we have to wear it for most away games because of this, even when it creates far more of a colour clash than the home kit. For example, versus Bolton, where our yellow shirt with black shorts was similar to Bolton's white shirts and black shorts. Is this going to be changed for next season?
I think the short answer is yes. And so effectively what happened is we inherited both the arrangement with the kit supplier, Castor, but also the sponsorship agreement, which saw RSK go on the front of the home shirt and UOG to go on the front of the away shirt, which actually, it's a sponsorship arrangement that works perfectly well from a commercial point of view. Got no problem. 2 great partners who we've got lots of values in common with, not just a commercial arrangement, etc. But that WhatsApp is correct. The contractual bit of that is that unless there's a very good reason why not, we wear the away shirt for away games so that University of Greenwich get bang for their buck, if you like. The way in which those contracts are structured means effectively that from next season onwards, that's unlikely to still be the case. I don't want to go into too much detail about the why, but that's just a fact.
We've had a question from Robert. He wants to ask if the club will consider putting on coaches to women's away games.
It's a good question. I think that is exactly the type of question actually that the advisory board, we would look to for the advisory board to advise on that. I'd imagine there'd be a piece of work that would be done around that, around looking at the demand and stuff. But if the demand is there, it's a logical decision, isn't it?
Phoebo asks, what's the fundamental steps we need to take to get us back into the Championship?
Look, either Gavin or I could answer that question, but effectively it's going to be the same, right? Which is the football operation. It's our job to make sure the football operation is properly funded, right? From the business perspective and being chairman of the board, we can't say to the football operation, you should achieve promotion if we don't give them the appropriate budgets to achieve that. That's just unfair and unreasonable. You might hope for promotion, but you couldn't say that was really your target. When the EFL did their benchmarking this year, we we had the 4th highest first team football spend. There was one club that didn't take part, which we suspect would have been a club that would be above us, so we're thinking of it as being the 5th highest football spend. Add in the academy and it's the 4th highest football spend. So, and 3 clubs go up every season. So, is going up a given? No, it's a sporting competition. It's a sporting competition, and Charlton's a great club with a great history, but Huddersfield is, and Birmingham is, and Barnsley is, and Reading. All these clubs have been in the Premier League. So we can't just sit here and say, well, we're Charlton, we automatically should go up. We have to earn that right. We believe that we are putting in place the investment which gives the football operation the chance to be able to do that, and Nathan's always supremely graceful about acknowledging that and accepting that and taking the accountability and responsibility about it, but also to be realistic about the time frame. Because when a club's, as I think Nathan said earlier on, when a club's been going in the wrong direction a long time, I know it's quite straightforward. People think, well, just buy a striker, everything will be okay. It's not as simple as that. There's an awful lot that has to be got right behind the scenes, and that can take, as I've seen in my previous roles at Oxford and at Sunderland, it can just take a little while for the oil tanker to get fully pointed back in the right direction. So there are many different answers. Lots of different things need to be got right. Our responsibility is to provide the budget and the stability and the governance which enables all these types of things. But even with all that said and done, in the end, you've got to go and win some football matches.
We've only got a few minutes left, and I'm going to try and get through as many questions as we possibly can. This one from Simon. Have the club any thoughts about showing away games on Sky in the fans bar?
I think we've done that before, haven't we? I think
we have done it once before, and I think it's one of those things which can be discussed with the advisory board. And in fact, if the it's the kind of topic, frankly, which if the fan advocates came to us and said, look, we think there's enough people who would come along to this, it's something that we would do. I mean, there are events that we're putting on here and we're testing the ground. Like we held an event here last year for the African Cup of Nations final, which was absolutely bombed out, brilliant, great success. Okay, so there's a market for that. That's interesting. So I think it's definitely one worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah.
A few supporters have gotten in touch about the women's team, asking sort of what's the plan and will there be an impact if they don't get promoted this season?
Well, an impact on what
Well, I suppose obviously the aspiration potentially to get into the Women's Super League, but if they don't, will that have an impact on how the club supports them?
Well, I speak to Karen quite regularly as well, actually. Almost more than I speak to Nathan, honestly. And I enjoy watching the women play. I mean, women's football in this country is developing rapidly. They put up a great show against Chelsea in the FA Cup earlier in the season, but you could see, the difference in levels there basically. Charlie's been spending a lot of time in this area, as has Jim.
It's very challenging. It's a very challenging environment. So let's just get the facts out and clear, right? There are 2 professional divisions of 12. So there are 24 professional women's clubs in this country. Amongst those 24 clubs are a couple of what might be called independents. So Durham and London City Lionesses are independent clubs, not attached to a men's club, which means that there are 22 men's clubs whose women's clubs are professional, of which there are 2 League One clubs, us and Birmingham, right? Now, effectively, when you look at what's happening at WSL 1, the top division, the wage bills in that division are accelerating to similar types of levels to what we're starting to see in the men's championship. So you're starting to see the top Women's Super League 1 team spending 12, 13, 14 million pounds a year on their wage bills and making, if you actually factor it all out correctly, losses which would be not far off what we make in our entire organisation. Now, from their perspective, they're receiving a vast amount of money from their TV deal, and they've got very large corporate sponsorship deals with global multinationals, many of which will have as clauses in those contracts, you need to have a professional women's team, and part of our sponsorship is going to make sure that happens. So there are good commercial reasons why those big men's Premier League clubs are doing that. But let's remember, there are men's Premier League clubs whose women's clubs are in divisions below ours. And so it's a challenging, very fast-moving environment. We're very proud of what our women's team's doing. There are teams in our division in WSL Championship who are still part-time. We're not, we're full-time. That's been brought to an end this summer. All clubs in division will be full-time, and the amount that clubs are going to be required to spend on them are going to be going up. So this is a fast-moving situation. It's something that we're keeping on a constant review, that we're speaking with Gemma White, who's the general manager of the women's club, and Karen and everyone about all the time, which is what does the future look like? Because unlike the men's game, where things are reasonably settled, in the women's game it seems to be changing almost once every 3 months.
We've got time for one more question. I've got two, and one of them is about broken turnstiles. So whoever submitted that question, I would advise, having listened to your answer earlier, Gavin, to get in contact with our fan engagement officer here at the football club. It was it fans@cfc.com?
That's right.
Fans@cfc.com. Tell them where that broken turnstile is, and fingers crossed we can get it fixed for you very soon. So final question then from Nick. Thanks for the operating figures. Are you able to provide figures for transfer dealings, both in and out?
Pretty much. So, over the last year or so, I believe, I'd have to sort of go back, but there's a sort of net transfer position that we probably spent net around about £800,000. So effectively have received in about, whatever it is, about £1 million and spent about 1.8 million quid, something like that. I'd have to go back and check
I think
that.
a little more.
Maybe even a little bit more.
I think just over 2 million.
So it's in that sort of ballpark. In the medium term, healthy football clubs make money from transfers. I know it's a sort of counterintuitive thing, because you imagine the clubs that are always spending loads but never selling any players are the healthy clubs. It's not like that at all. Man City make fortunes out of selling players, absolute fortunes. And then you look at the clubs who are constantly buying players but can never sell one. It's not actually a very great sign. So there's been a conscious decision over the last year to try to build up the asset base. So when you sign players like Kane Ramsey and Alex Mitchell, these types of young players who we believe are going to progress going forward, we believe that those are good investments both to improve us today but also to build an asset base for the future.
Brilliant. Well, look, that is just about all we have time for this meeting. It leaves me enough time to say a massive thank you to all our guests this evening, from Heather and Lucy, and of course Ali, Nathan and Jim at the training ground, and of course Gavin and Charlie alongside me here in the studio as well. And whilst that brings to a conclusion this meeting, we have got a very busy weekend ahead. Our under-21s are in action tomorrow. Both our men's and women's team are playing here at the Valley over the weekend. And we've got a football fix on Tuesday night as well. It looks to be a very busy, exciting couple of months ahead. And as has been outlined this evening, we can achieve success if we do that all together. Thank you so much for your support, and we will see you at the Valley soon.